Over the past 2 weeks, I made and released 2 videos about socialism, and these videos made some people very happy, other people not so much. So in the spirit of Nikola Tesla, let's do this in threes. In this video, we are going to address some common misconceptions about both socialism and neoliberal capitalism. Some absolute bangers, such as, ha, you're a socialist, but you own a cell phone. Socialism is when no cell phone. As you continue to watch this video, you'll pick up on a common pattern. Many quips and arguments used to discredit socialism can not only be flipped and used to argue against capitalism, but are often more accurate criticisms when pointed in that direction. So let's get going. Misconception number 1, socialism is when no innovation. I'm sure this is one that we've all heard many times. Capitalism leads to more innovation and inspires people to create, invent, and come up with masterclasses of ingenuity. Now, I do believe that laissez-faire capitalism served its purpose in its conception. I'd say it's an objectively better system than those that came before it, namely slavery, feudalism, and mercantile capitalism. But we shouldn't be beholden to this economic model and refuse to even conceptualize what life could be like without it. The idea that all the technological advancements that we take for granted in the modern day are due to capitalism is not true. The programs that laid the groundwork for the computer you use, your cell phone, the internet, and a great many developments in the medical field are taxpayer-funded government programs. The NIH-funded research leading to diagnostic tools and devices that intersect medicine with modern tech fields. The foundation of the modern internet was laid by the Advanced Research Projects Agency network in the 60s and 70s. Research for semiconductor technology, a crucial part of the development of microprocessors, was funded by the National Science Foundation. The U.S. Department of Defense provided contracts for early computing technology and research. This led to development of mainframes and early personal computers. Project Mac was a government-funded MIT program that dealt with the development of time-sharing systems and laid the groundwork for the foundations of modern operating systems. The NSF supported research into wireless communications that laid the foundation for modern cellular systems, and the list goes on. Trust me, it's a long list. It's a very big, girthy list. So next time someone tells you that socialism is when no iPhone, tell them that capitalism is when you, the taxpayer, funds the development of the iPhone and some son of a bitch swoops it up and privatizes the profits generated by it. You funded that shit. By capitalist logic, you invested in the research, you took the risk. Why aren't you compensated? Because the system is bullshit. It doesn't even adhere to its own dogma. In reality, in many cases, the risk is socialized and the reward is privatized. To quote well-known smart guy Noam Chomsky, if you walked around the building where I worked 50 years ago, you would have seen electronic firms, Raytheon, iTech, others, there to essentially rob the technology that's being developed at public expense and seeing if they could turn it into something applicable for profits. Misconception number 2, socialism is anti-freedom or anti-democracy. Now, I don't doubt that many old so-called communist projects were not beacons of democracy. I'm not going to fight you on that. But this, of course, is reductive, and it leaves out democratic socialist experiments like Chile under Salvador Allende, or Rojava's democratic confederalism inspired by the ideas of Abdullah Öcalan. And if I just said that like the whitest man who ever lived, I'm sorry. Rojava is an autonomous region in northern Syria which emphasizes democratic features such as decentralized governance and direct democratic participation brought about through councils, assemblies, or communes, gender equality, secular pluralism, and environmental cognizance. They even go as far as mandating that leadership positions be held by both a man and a woman to ensure that the desires of everyone are more efficiently represented. Despite being situated in a conflict zone, Rojava has existed for over a decade and does its best to ensure democracy is properly cherished and respected. In stark contrast to this, enter the bourgeois democracy of the US. It's no great secret that the American political system is infiltrated by money. Plutocratic billionaires lobby the government to ensure that the interests of the wealthy are prioritized and addressed, often at the expense of the remaining population. Per election, an individual can donate $3,300 maximum to a political candidate, meaning $3,300 for the candidate's primary and $3,300 for the general election. So $6,600 for a candidate's campaign cycle. Now, you might be thinking, that's not a crazy amount of money. It doesn't seem like a big deal. And I would agree with that. But that's not the whole story. In 2010, the US Supreme Court ruled that the government cannot restrict independent expenditures by corporations and unions, citing free speech rights and the First Amendment as the foundation of their argument. This case was called Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission, and super PACs emerged in the wake of this ruling. A super PAC allows for the fundraising of unlimited sums of money from individuals, corporations, unions, and other organizations. Although a super PAC cannot directly coordinate with a candidate's campaign, it can spend money on independent expenditures like political advertisements, digital campaigns, and voter outreach. Critics of super PACs, like myself, argue that the concept is inherently anti-democratic as it allows for the interests of a few ultra-wealthy individuals to take precedence over the will of the majority. But then again, free market, bitches. Misconception number 3, socialism is when no food. Now, I don't blame people for associating the concept of famine with past so-called communist or socialist states. From the Soviet famine of 1930 to the Great Chinese Famine that imposed the same fate upon millions of Chinese people, starvation and famine have been linked to the idea of communism in the minds of many. Now, I'm not here to defend these famines or the ridiculous mismanagement that caused them, but instead to understand them better and look past the rudimentary idea that the only cause of these famines was socialism. One of Mao Zedong's campaigns that I consider particularly memorable is the Four Pests campaign. This was part of Mao's broader Great Leap Forward program. The Four Pests campaign is pretty self-explanatory. Its goal was to rid the country of pests. One of the pests in the crosshairs of Mr. Mao was the sparrow. He was told that sparrows were eating all of the grain, so he began to remove them. Upon removing them, he realized the ecological imbalance he created when locusts, whose population had been kept under control by the sparrows, multiplied rapidly and ate the grain that Mao had originally feared the sparrows would eat. Over in the Soviet Union, a scientist by the name of Trofim Lysenko cooked up some pretty wacky theories, including what he thought were innovative plant breeding practices. Lysenkoist principles, which are now considered pseudoscientific, were adopted in China during the Great Leap Forward. Long story short, his agricultural theories were dumb as hell, and wherever they were implemented, famine, death, and calamity followed. I say all of this to say I attribute these famines and many of the conditions that led to them to stupidity, Lysenkoism, and incompetent economic management. All things that are not necessarily inherent to socialism. To quote this little troublemaker again, here is a passage of his in response to the body counts of non-communist countries. That comes to about 100 million people in India alone from 1947 to 1980, but we don't call that a crime of democratic capitalism. If we were to carry out that calculation throughout the world, I won't even talk about it. They're not intended, just like the Chinese famine wasn't intended, but they are ideological and institutional crimes, and capitalist democracy and its advocates are responsible for them in whatever sense supporters of so-called communism are responsible for the Chinese famine. We don't have the entire responsibility, but certainly a large part of it. To build off Chomsky's sentiment here, I thought it would be interesting to analyze where lack of food, hunger, or even starvation are prevalent in the world today. According to World Vision, the number of people suffering from chronic hunger worldwide has climbed to 783 million as of 2022. The WFP identified 10 countries and territories with the highest number of people in crisis. These are the DRC, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Yemen, Myanmar, Syria, Sudan, Ukraine, and Pakistan. None of these countries are socialist, most are capitalist, but the common theme here is that a lot of these countries are suffering from wars and, in cases of the Congo and Sudan, egregious human rights violations. I wouldn't place the blame solely on capitalism, even though, when the tables are turned, anti-communists are quick to forego all intersectional analysis and just blame socialism. In contrast to the claim that socialism or socialist policies led to famine due to an integral flaw in their design, the story of Upper Volta is one that you should become familiar with. I spoke about this in a previous video, but to give a quick summary, Upper Volta was one of the poorest countries in West Africa. It was a French colony devastated by poverty, lack of agricultural productivity, poor healthcare, low literacy, gender discrimination, and more. Anti-colonialist Marxist-Leninist Thomas Sankara acquired power in 1983, renamed the country to Burkina Faso, remedied all aforementioned issues with the country, and within only 4 years, UN analysts declared the country food self-sufficient. So to boil down the entirety of socialist theory as one that is inextricable from famine or poverty is reductive. A few honorable mentions I want to really quickly tackle, and we're going to start with socialism is when no business. I don't blame anyone for being under the assumption that business is frowned upon by socialists. Honestly, I don't blame anyone for believing any of the misconceptions I set out to debunk in this video. If all you've been told for your entire life is that socialism is this evil, anti-freedom austerity cult, then I understand. But no, socialism is not inherently anti-business. It's anti-exploitation, and it's in favor of adjusting the proximity between the worker and the means of production. Mondragon is a great example. Mondragon is a corporation and federation of worker cooperatives based in Spain. The business model of Mondragon allows for democracy of the workplace, worker autonomy, and is a solid example of the flavor of socialist practice that many libertarian socialists advocate for. Mondragon is the 7th largest Spanish company in terms of asset turnover and employs dozens of thousands of workers in fields ranging from finance, retail, industry, and more. Honorable mention number 2, socialism is destined to fail. This is easy to disprove. If people, more specifically the US government, truly believed that socialism was an economically untenable and self-destructive theory and it could never last, they wouldn't feel the need to spend billions of dollars or kill millions of people in the name of anti-communism. As seen in Operation Gladio, they even funded stay-behind fascist groups from World War II to fight communism. Are you really going to tell me that socialism is such a dumb idea that they needed to give money to literal Nazis in order to ensure its demise? If it's so stupid, why are you spending so much time and effort? Just let it run its course. It's going to fail. To build off of this, the US government had a geopolitical hypothesis called the domino theory, which posited that if one country fell to communism, it would spread to all the other countries in the region. This was a big part of the justification for their intervention in Vietnam and other countries in Indochina. They obviously deemed socialism efficient enough to require external force to crush. Honorable mention number 3, socialism is government handouts. I would argue the opposite. The current economic model of neoliberal capitalism is one that needs to be bailed out by the government every 8 years or so because it's inherently self-destructive. It's so unstable that it needs big daddy government to save it from itself once a decade. In addition to this, the government already engages in handouts to the tune of billions of dollars when they give subsidies to massive corporations and banks. Elon Musk, notoriously honest and not hypocritical guy, claims that he's against subsidies, but he has no problem accepting billions of dollars worth of them. That doesn't seem like a free market to me. Kind of seems like a planned economy. So if you believe socialism to be the government intervening on behalf of the downtrodden, then at least be honest and admit that the current capitalist model is the government intervening on behalf of the rich. And you're okay with that, you're fine with that. That's enough out of me. Subscribe if you want more videos and let me know what I should make a video about next. Thank you.